Okay, so I'm about to close up this unit here after rewiring it for a conversion. After I put the panel in, now I'm making a base. Once I put them on, the wiring won't be visible. So I'm going to do a little record of what's going on here. So to back up a little bit, this unit was designed to run on 13.5 volts, and it used electrolyte, which was lye, to conduct at low voltage like that. And I've since discovered that it can run with no electrolyte at 120 volts very nicely. And so anyways, here's the old setup. It was a back panel with the AC to DC converter box that put out 13.5 volts. And the controller, timer switch, temp gauge, and amp and volt gauge. So this was the old stuff I took off. And now, what it looks like now is super simple. Panel with a timing gauge, or timing timer, and a water temperature gauge. Nice and reliable, stainless steel, made for brewing or something like that. So the probe goes in there. Right. That's it. That's how simple it is. So that for the user, anyways. So the electronics is very straightforward. Comes in from the wall through the back panel into the switch, and then gets divided from the switch to the rectifiers and capacitors. So what this does is the capacitors will amp limit, not volt limit, amp limit. Only lets 1 amp AC through per capacitor. So I'm running basically 2 circuits, a rectifier and a capacitor, each for one leg of the unit here. So 1 amp is allowed to come through. It goes through to the rectifiers, gets converted into DC current, and then correspondingly goes to each cell pack. Cell packs have negative plate plus 8 neutrals and a positive plate. So we'll see how that produces. Previous to this, the original Deuce model, I converted it to 120 volt, and it produced the same amount of gas, actually more. And I didn't have the capacitors in place yet, and I deliberately ran it and see what would happen. It did cascade a bit and got pretty hot. So to prevent that, of course, is an invention of George Wiseman's, is to use these like limiting valves. So only 1 amp can come through no matter what. So the unit can heat up. It's not going to pull any more amps. It can't, because of these limiting valves. So that's what that's about. And basically, when I do get putting it together, it's going to look like this inside. I put the capacitors down on the base to give it a low center of gravity, a little more stability, and the rectifiers are up away from the panel. They may get warm a little bit, but there's only 1 amp running through, so they really shouldn't heat up at all. The wires I have are from an old stove cable, and they're kind of overkill. They're number 10s, and they're really solid, good wires, but I'd rather err on the side of caution. Put really good wires in there, shrink-wrapped connectors, all the proper connectors, and stainless steel and all that stuff. So should be reliable, safe, and once the back panel gets put on, then there's no access for anybody to, get a shock at all. That's completely safe and eliminate that risk. The base I'm adding because before, that box acted like a third leg, giving the whole system a stability. So by itself, it needs something, right? So this new base here is going to be fastened to the bottom of the cups and be a permanent part of it. And in the end, I think I'll actually paint this black, because this is a different PVC and it's prone to accepting stains and dust and everything, so I might as well just paint it black. So yeah, that's it. A nice clean look, reliable, still the same runtime as before, about 3 hours consecutive runtime before it gets warm. If the needle's pointing straight up and down, that's about 65 Celsius. Give it some cool time. It can go higher, but you're risking heating up the plastic too much or whatever. The plastic can go to 100, so I mean, you got a little bit of room in there. But, that's it. It runs on well water, no electrolyte, and super simple. Alright, thanks for watching. Okay, so here we are at part 2. I've got the unit put together with the back and front panels and the base that I showed in the previous video, painted, put all together. So what I'm showing here now is this is running on just well water. So for it to turn yellow like this is quite normal. And so to prove that this is well water, I'll get my lovely assistant to hang on to the phone. Just one moment. Okay, to prove this is well water, the last one I proved I could put my hand in it, but this one I cannot. So I will simply pour a spoon in and drink it. Doesn't even taste any different. I don't taste any difference other than the water turned color. And definitely no electrolyte in there. Okay. Okay, so I think I've clearly demonstrated that it is just well water that's in there. It does discolor. I had the unit with the cap off for this purpose to show that it's just well water. Okay, so give me 1 second and I'll put the plug back on the top. Okay, so I put the plug back on the top here, and it just goes into a simple utility hose and out to the bubbling stone. Regular aquarium bubbling stone. Now, people that follow my work, you realize something that's missing right now, and that would be the bubbler. It's no longer necessary because there's no chance of any lye fumes to come out of the unit because there is no lye. So, we'll talk about the browns. Now, what the browns are is very popular with water electrolysis. So the invisible solutes that are in the water, such as like sugar and salt, you throw them in and they dissolve and you don't see them. Well, in water electrolysis, it makes those things visible again. And because of the presence of the oxygen in the gas that's created, it oxidizes them. So they look like rust. But it's not rust. Rust would sink. This floats. So I made a little rhyme for myself. It's lighter than water, but heavier than air. And where you see it is where it stays there. So here's our production. And you'll see the browns getting kicked up by the bubble action. And it turns brown. Now this design of vertical design is, it does not clog. So any of this brown sediment that's created can actually settle down in the cups at the bottom. So in that respect, this unit is self-cleaning. It does not need to be dumped out, ever. This sediment actually was a lot more. This was much darker before. So over time, each time you shut it off and the sediment kind of goes down, goes past the plates, settles in the cup, and stays there. Unless for some reason the unit is kicked up upside down. But anyways, that's not really in general practice. So here is our production rate. So this is 120 volt run through the capacitors as a 1 amp per cell limit, and that is adequate gas production for home health use. So what I like to show people sometimes too is that this is really gas and it's not just air. And also the safety of this gas is that you can be right above it and nothing happens. So if this was a petroleum-based fuel, the fumes would be ignitable. In this case, they're not, until you get much closer. Now the bubbles popping are still blowing at the flame, but not igniting the flame, until I get a little closer. Okay, good. The gas hasn't condensed enough yet. Because the unit was wide open, the air inside here is, the gas is diluted. So as this continues to run, it will purify the amount of gas in it and therefore be easier to ignite. Here we go. Getting a bit more pure, a bit more potent. Okay, getting there. Again, I can have the flame right above it, and there's no danger of it getting ignited. So what I'm showing here is that this gas cannot fill a room and become an explosion hazard. It's not possible. So this browns is unsightly. A lot of people's first opinion would be, ew, how is clean gas coming out of that? Same concern people had with lye being used, but in that case we used a bubbler. So this is coming straight out, and I will testify right now that the gas coming out of here smells like fresh air. Fresh mountain air. It is absolutely beautiful. That's what you smell if you put your nose above the water here. It's just fresh air. So we have the hydrogen, the oxygen, and the electrons going into this water. Now it should be more of a pop. See? Pretty awesome. Okay. One moment, now I'll show you another feature that I added. So when using distilled water and lye as your electrolyte, the water stays clear. So the only downer about using well water is that you will have these browns. So this unit was designed with the distilled water and electrolyte idea, and that's why I had the clear acrylic built into the tower here. But since it's not needed and I want, make it presentable, I found out just recently that a simple 4-inch PVC pipe just slides right over. Oh, and there. That's it. You don't need to look at it. There's no danger of low water level problem. So if you're using the water and you haven't checked it in a while, you're using it a lot and it gets all the way down here, there's no explosion risk. Once the water gets low enough to the positive plate, it just stops working. With horizontal cells, the gas can accumulate above the plates, and from electrode to electrode can actually make a spark and ignite the gas. So low water level on horizontal cells is always a concern, but this one it's not because of its design of being vertical. I'm still going with my just press and fit rubber hose design. Keep in mind too that I made this with all everyday materials. That's by purpose, so that I can teach other people how to make these units. I call this unit the Deuce. 2 cell packs, now running straight from the wall. Nothing overheats. And with a simple thermometer, you can keep an eye on the temperature. Actually, over here is 65 degrees Celsius. So this thing can run for hours before it even gets that warm. I've only had it up to here so far, and I remember running it the other day for about 3 hours solid, and it only got about that warm. So it has lots of run time. Simple timer switch, and the base is PVC, and it's flexible, but strong, not really breakable. The whole unit weighs maybe 30-35 pounds, around there. It's not that heavy. You can just pick it up and carry it, no problem. So that's what I've come up with so far. So the future units that I build will just have a solid tower here instead of doing the clear acrylic job because of the browns being visible. But yeah, so quite pleased how this went, and I thank God every day for my discoveries that I've made. I've made another recent discovery. This cell taught me something very valuable. So when I first converted this, I took it into the kitchen and filled it up, and what happened is the water actually turned black. I was quite surprised. I'm like, what? This worked with the previous one. Why isn't it a problem with this one? And the production was really low. So what happened is I added electrolyte to it. Didn't make any difference. It actually made the production less, and the water was black, black, black. And I'm like, all right, something's wrong. So I dumped out the electrolyte, and I was rinsing the unit out, because what I thought to do was maybe flip this over and access the capacitors and take them offline, like bypass them. and then see how it operated. But I was rinsing it out for the third time, and this was in the bathroom, in the tub, and a little voice in my head said, plug it in, check it out. So I plugged it in, and voila, it works beautiful. And I was like, what's going on here? The previous cells I had done, I also filled them up in the bathroom from the tub. And then this time I did, and it worked perfectly. So anyways, in a nutshell, I realized that the kitchen sink has about 25 feet of copper wire that the water travels through to get to the kitchen sink. Whereas in the bathroom, it's all plastic pipe that goes to the bathroom spigot. I was like, wow, that made a difference. So the copper actually added something to the water that turned black and killed the production. So this water from our bathroom tub is the special water because it's not going through any copper pipes. And now I've gotten it to work. The water only turns a little bit brown, which is completely normal. And when the sediment settles, you see that yellowish. That's completely normal. And that's it. Now the good news is that the ions from the well water are in there, and they'll stay in there. So you don't need to add anything. When topping up the water later, you can use any water, because the ions are in there already doing the conducting. And the cool part is as time goes on, the water in the electrolyzer actually collapses, believe it or not, and gets more conductive. So in a couple of weeks to follow, this production will actually go up. And that's why those capacitors are important, to make sure that no more than 1 amp ever goes into a cell pack. So that's what I got so far. No bubbler needed. You can breathe it directly right from the hose or a cannula. Apply it directly any way you wish. And that's the production rate I got going here. It's probably close to a liter a minute, maybe a little under. And that is the same as people out there who are building these machines are usually a little bit under a liter a minute production. So I've matched that with potential for more. But the safety of 0 electrolyte, 0 explosion risk, and self-cleaning, never needs to be cleaned. Top it up with whatever water you want. Voila. The deuce. Alright. Thanks for watching.